A woman's mental health is never more vulnerable than in the first year after she's given birth, through her whole life. If you take anyone and you want to kind of break them down, you would mess about with their routine, take sleep out of the equation, and you isolate them from other people after a woman's had a baby. All of those things, which are weapons of war, by the way, are affected. Saying don't compare yourself is like saying don't breathe, right? We are social beings.
Yeah.
Our ability to compare is actually a real strength, but when it goes wrong, we're making the wrong comparisons.
We sat down with Dr. Julie Smith, a world-renowned psychologist, New York Times bestselling author, and mom. With over 7 million followers on social media, she has helped millions understand their emotions on a deeper level. We talk about postpartum depression, anxiety, why mom guilt can be a good thing, and so much more, all on today's episode. Dr. Julie Smith, welcome to Unplanned.
Thank you.
I always feel like I need a cheer at the beginning of a podcast. I don't know why that is.
Why not?
Get the energy up.
Yeah, gets it going.
I have something kind of embarrassing to admit. I was actually Googling yesterday what a clinical psychologist is because I didn't know the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most common questions I get, actually. So
Really?
you're not alone. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so can you explain it? Because
Yeah.
I still am trying
Wait,
to...
and a therapist, because I feel like they're all kind of get confusing for me.
Yeah. So a psychiatrist will train in medicine, and then they'll choose psychiatry as opposed to, working in the ER or in general practice. They'll kind of go off into mental health that way, but their focus is generally diagnosis and medications and stuff like that. Some of them train in kind of therapeutic sort of talking therapies and stuff like that, but mostly that, in my experience of working with them, they're mostly focused on medications, whereas psychologists start with a psychology degree and then go on to do a doctorate in clinical psychology. So they're always focused on that kind of formulation and talking therapies and those kind of things. So it's, the same work, but from different angles, coming from different trainings.
Interesting. So the psychologist one is more of the medical side.
So the psychiatrist is the medical side, psychologist is psychology.
See, I already screwed it up. I thought I knew the difference. Yeah, I'm tracking. You're tracking?
Don't quiz me on it, but...
Yeah.
Okay.
But then you can always have a therapist as well that isn't necessarily a psychologist, but they've trained, because there are lots of different modalities of therapy, and some people might start off as a mental health nurse, and then they might train in one or two kind of therapies, and they just do those ones, whereas a psychologist has lots of different things they can take from because they have that kind of extensive training. So
should someone's therapist be a psychologist? Like, is that recommended?
Well, I'm biased because I am one. But I think they just have that breadth and depth of training. So you learn about lots of different therapies, and you have the time to, practice that and be assessed on doing that really well. And you learn how to do kind of research and stuff like that. But, so I guess if you only have one therapy as your kind of tool, then you're a bit more restricted potentially, but it depends, because if that's the therapy you're looking for, then maybe that's what you need. But yeah.
What's that like for your husband being married to you? I feel like that must be intimidating.
I honestly think of that about our therapist. We were just talking about that. Like, that dude never wins an argument.
Yeah, well, sometimes for my kids as well. My son the other day, he's like, "Mum, don't give me the Dr. Julie bit." I was obviously starting to look a bit so like, well, should we talk about this? And he was like, "No, Mum." So
I am so curious what that looks like in parenting as a psychologist. Like, I think we're in the stage now where we're definitely in the emotional space for both of our boys, because they're 2 and 1. Like, when they're like escalating and doing fits, like, I guess, like, from a psychologist perspective, how do you parent your kids through fits like that?
Yeah, do you know what? It's been a learning process. I think probably early on when I had children, I read probably too many books, and because then you then start to add a kind of level of perfectionism to what you're doing, and actually your children don't need you to be anything other than human, right? And loving, and part of being a parent then is holding those boundaries and things like that. So I think if you're so focused on getting it perfect, having the perfect response every single time, then you end up getting yourself into a bit of a spiral, I think, where you're kind of criticizing yourself, and I think it's okay to make mistakes as a parent and do things that you wouldn't normally want to do, And then it's okay to kind of repair that and say sorry if you want to or need to. If it's ruptured the relationship with your child in some way, then it's okay to say, do you know what? I'm really sorry I shouted then. I felt really angry, and I'm going to try I'm going to try harder next time. And that doesn't mean you don't hold the same boundary that you were holding necessarily, but Dr. Becky Goodman does that brilliantly. She's over in the States. I think she's in New York, and she talks about that kind of, being human, but not being afraid to say sorry and repair anything when it's gone wrong. Yeah,
I think that's really cool. I feel like growing up, I love my parents, have an amazing relationship with them, but I never saw that response, like them saying I'm sorry to me.
Yeah.
And now as a parent, I'm like, wow, that would have been, I want to give that gift to my kids, because then it kind of makes it like you said, it kind of holds both the child and the parent accountable, like to like respecting boundaries and things like that.
Yeah, because I think there's probably a little bit of stuff online where it sort of almost demonizes anger as a parent or frustration, that you're not supposed to feel any of that or show it. And I think, if your child never sees you experience those emotions, then they have no template for how to experience it themselves or how to deal with it. It will feel like this is the emotion I'm not supposed to have. And, so it's okay to kind of feel those emotions, express them in the healthiest way you can. And because they won't do what you say, they'll do what you do.
A lot of what I'm trying to like practice as a parent is, like you're saying, is like modeling. Yeah. And so like when I've been able to be like, that was like, even just like if I'm like over exaggerating something, I'm like, okay, really wasn't that bad. But like, just like really bringing out the points to them, just be like, this is how I felt. And that's kind of like, this was a bad choice I made. Like things like that. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's a tangible way for me to kind of walk them through like decision making at this point.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm so curious, how do you go from being a clinical psychologist to a best-selling author? Your new book, Open When, is now a New York Times best-selling author, which I think you just told us recently.
Sweet.
How does all of that happen? Because you just casually mentioned too in conversation you've had a million copies sold, over 1 million copies sold of your first book. How have you been able to do all that?
It still blows my mind a little bit. I mean, I worked in the NHS, the National Health Service here in the UK, for about 10 years. And then once I had 2 of our now 3 children, I realized I can't do all of this, not well anyway. So I started a really small private practice. I had a therapy room that was in our garden, and I would just kind of see people around school hours and stuff like that. And at that point, that was when I, had a really nice kind of balanced life. And I just noticed all these people that were coming through for therapy that didn't really need long-term therapy. Once they had the educational stuff, a lot of people don't realize that when you go to therapy, you do a lot of talking, but you also learn a fair bit about how your mind works, right? And how you can impact on your mood and your relationships and stuff. And I found so many people, once they had some of that education, they were so sort of empowered to be able to, they felt confident to cope with whatever came next. And people would say, I'd love those moments where people would say, I think I'm going to be all right. No matter what happens here, I think I can deal with it. And so I used to, Matt, my poor husband, used to have to hear me complaining, this stuff should be more available. People shouldn't have to pay to come and see me to find out this stuff. So he said, well, go on then, make it available, and let's, make some videos on, put them on YouTube or something. And so we did. We made a couple of terrible YouTube videos. And not long later, Matt discovered TikTok, and all this short form video was just starting to happen. So that was end of 2019. And he said, why don't we make some bite-size, one message per video, stick them on TikTok and see what happens. And my initial response was, not a chance. I'm talking about mental health. I'm just going to be trolled out of there because, this is like dancing and comedy and all this fun stuff. But he said, we just kind of said, well, let's try. And then if it doesn't, if no one listens, then we'll just stop. And I honestly thought it would be something we did for a couple of months because it felt like a nice thing to do. And then it would fizzle out. And, so that was November 2019. And within a couple of weeks, I would just get home from school run. I would put my phone on the table and I would just kind of say a few words about something from therapy or something. But yeah, within a couple of weeks, people were just messaging, emailing. That's really interesting. What are the next steps? Or can I hear more about this? Or can I have a video on that? And we were just kind of reaching these people who wanted more and more and more. And so by Christmas, I didn't tell anyone we were doing it, but by Christmas time, we had about 100,000 followers. So that was like a month later. And it was just kind of getting out of hand. And yeah, so now we're, 2025. And I think it's about 9 or 10 million followers across all the different platforms.
That's unreal.
It just blows my mind.
What's something that happened in your time as a therapist that made you realize people need to have this information? I'm sure there's a story that you can think of where you just wish everybody could have the resources that you were giving to that person that was going through a tough time.
Do you know, I think it was a few people really, but all kind of young people, maybe in their early 20s and stuff, where essentially they would come in with, the details are all different, but the theme was the same, which is they just didn't have the confidence in their ability to manage their own mental health or the normal ups and downs of daily life, right? None of them had clinical disorders as such, but they just didn't trust in their ability to cope with things that came up, and because they hadn't necessarily been given the tools to know that, you're not at the mercy of your emotional experience. Emotions will come and go, and you can soothe your way through that, but there are also things you can do to help yourself in the process, bring yourself back to calm or activate yourself, that kind of thing. And so once they kind of had some of those skills, we used to talk about these, I used to call them kind of cheerleader moments, where we would have this sort of like moment of personal victory for them, where I wished I had like pom-poms down the side of my chair that I could pull out and go, yes, we did it. And, so many of those moments where people would just build in their confidence, they'd learn about a concept or a skill, and then over the next few weeks, they would attach that to an experience, and then they'd come back and go, I did it. And you realize, oh my gosh, this stuff, it's not rocket science. It's fairly simple, but when you take it seriously and you put it into your day-to-day life, it starts to make these differences that then add up and accumulate. And when that starts to happen, your confidence builds. And so then these people would get to a point where they'd go, do you know what? I think I'll be all right. From going, when can I have my next appointment? I need to come and speak to you as soon as possible, to, do you know what? Whatever the outcome is, I think I'll be all right. And I'll give you a call if I'm not. And my job was always to put myself out of business, really.
Your job is to put yourself out of business.
So I would kind of, your job is to, tool people up so they don't need you anymore. And then it's the ultimate kind of terrible business decision as well to then give away that for free. So that's what I did. But it turned out all right there, because then, and I guess the thing is with social media is all the videos are, in a random order. There's only so much you can put into 60 seconds. And, so it's a good kind of starter, but it's not complete in itself. So the book then felt like the perfect way to kind of put all that together in a coherent order that you could just keep on your coffee table, and then whenever you need it, you can dip in and dip out. And it's not clinical disorder. Neither of them have any clinical disorders in them. They're all the normal human experiences that we all face at some point, but no one gives you a manual for. And they often leave you feeling a bit confused or full of emotion, or struggling to work out what do I focus on, and how do I kind of start moving through this. Because sometimes you just need someone to kind of bring a few of the words that you need to hear, don't you? You need someone to give you a bit of a pep talk. And maybe you do that for each other. My husband does that for me. I don't think he realizes that, so don't tell him. But he always kind of says the right thing. If you're kind of in a bit of a moment, he manages to say the right thing that just shifts my attention in the right direction, that reminds me I can move through this. And but not everybody has that person, right? And even if you do, they're not always there. So I think those are the moments then when you kind of, it's good to reach to a book or something else.
These people going through identity crises in their 20s, people that are depressed and having mental health problems, is a big part of that, because they don't have community. They don't have that close friend. They don't have someone in their life that they can talk to about it. I noticed you just mentioned your husband. He knows how to say the right thing to just kind of set you back on track. Is that a common theme that you notice in people that are really struggling? They don't have any sort of support system.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it there. It is modern life lacks community in the way that, when I think about even talking to my husband's parents, when they talk about, living in, they used to live in London, but, everyone lived in these kind of small areas of London where everybody knew each other. And from that, you get this continuity and a sense of community and a kind of moral upstanding as well, that it means something to be a good person in your community and do the right thing and be honest, and because you've got a reputation to uphold, because everybody knows you and you know everybody, and you all help each other out, and we're supposed to live like that as human beings. But modern life and the development of huge cities where, I live in a small town. And I always find it strange when I come to London that nobody looks each other in the eye. If you're on the train or whatever, or, nobody interacts. Everyone's doing their own thing. And I think sometimes that's just a symptom of, not the people, it's a symptom of having so many people in one space that don't know each other.
Thank you to Haya for sponsoring this portion of today's episode. You guys, it is part of our morning routine, and it's actually a crucial part. The kids look forward to it so much, is having their Haya each morning.
Which Griffin calls medicine.
Yes.
We've told him it's a vitamin, but he still calls it medicine.
Actually, recently they've been calling it candy.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
It tastes that good, which is amazing because typical children's vitamins are basically just that, candy in disguise, filled with 5 grams of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk that growing kids should just never eat. Mm-hmm. And that's actually why they created Haya. It's a pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin formulated with the help of nutritional experts. Haya is pressed with a blend of organic fruits and veggies, then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals.
The containers are very aesthetic, and your kids can also decorate the container.
And it's really fun to get them involved in that way. It just makes taking their vitamins more fun. Plus, I think we all know how choosy toddlers can be. Haya now also has a kids' daily greens and superfoods, which is a chocolate-flavored greens powder designed specifically for kids, packed with 55 plus whole food ingredients to support brain power, development, and digestion. You just take a scoop of that and mix it in with their milk or any non-dairy beverage of their choice, and it's delicious, it's nutritious, and your kids will actually really, really love it.
We've actually worked out a special deal with Haya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim the deal, you must go to hayahealth.com/unplanned. This deal is not available on their regular website, so go to hayahealth.com/unplanned and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. Why do people in the UK use the term rabbit in headlights? Because I was listening to you on a podcast. I heard you say that, and it was cracking me up. Yeah. I'd never heard someone say that before. Abby literally said out loud, "That's adorable."
Yeah, we have a lot of rabbits in the UK, or less so when they're caught in headlights, because often they don't know which way to go, and they dive about the road.
Deer in headlights.
Oh yeah, you have deer, right? Yeah.
Do you have deer in London?
Yeah, not
UK?
in London, but in the countryside. Yeah.
So that's a common thing, is to hit a rabbit with your car. So this saying is
not hit a rabbit, but they get caught. Like they see the headlights.
Yeah, it's the same as the deer thing, where if they're in the road and they're facing your headlights, they just don't know which way to turn because they're kind of blinded by the intense light. And
in the countryside, are you guys eating a lot of rabbit? Because when I was a kid, my dad would always go deer hunting.
Really?
And that was a big deal. It was like, oh, we got a deer, yay!
Yeah,
is that a thing here?
We don't. I'm sure there are people.
People eat rabbit.
I'm sure there are people that do, but yeah, we don't.
There's probably some Brits that eat rabbit. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I bet there are. Yeah, but out in the countryside.
In the country, not in London.
Yeah. That's like equivalent to eating a squirrel, I feel like.
I think people eat squirrels too.
Yeah. I'm sure they do, right? Yeah. And once upon a time, that would have been, I remember my husband's dad saying about, when they were children, there was not much to eat. So if they managed to catch a rabbit, then that would be dinner. And
wow.
Yeah, but I guess it's a long time ago.
That seems difficult.
Yes. No, I not to talk about something sad, because I don't want to bring on something sad, but like I think I heard you talk about
Matt, sadness is a normal human emotion.
It's normal human emotion, but I feel for you because you opened up recently about your cancer diagnosis, breast cancer.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry you're going through that. That was actually where I think I heard you use the term rabbit in headlights.
Yeah.
That must have really put things to the test. I mean, you help a lot of people, but I'm sure now dealing with that, you're like, okay, how do I approach all this on my own? Because you've always been the person to help other people, but now it's almost like you need to help yourself. I guess my question is, tell me more about why you decided to rewrite the part of your new book, the part about, read this when
fear shows up.
When fear shows up.
Yeah. I was about a week away from handing in the manuscript for Open When. And, everything was really busy. I was at the point of kind of editing and polishing up, ready to kind of send it all off to my editor. And, I went in to get these results. And do you know what? I had normal kind of lumps and bumps before, and I'd had these biopsies, and it had never turned out to be anything. So I kind of assumed it would be the same, that it would just be one of those things. And I even said to my husband, you don't come with me today, because our son was poorly at the time, and so I said, take him to the doctor, I'll go and get this sorted, and then we'll meet at the end of the day. And he just kind of said, no, I'll come. And he kind of made arrangements so that our son was covered. And I'm really glad he did, because you walk into the room and there's not only your consultant, but there's this Macmillan nurse, which is I don't know if you have that in the US, but it's a cancer charity that's in the UK. And I spotted her, and I just had this sort of rush of adrenaline go through my body of, oh gosh, he's leaning forward looking really sad. What is going on? And I totally get it now when people say they kind of couldn't remember what was said in the appointment, because you're just trying to sort of contain yourself and focus on the words. And I'm so lucky we caught it as early as you possibly could. And so, I'm out the other side, and I didn't have to have anything like, chemo or the stuff that makes you really, really poorly and unwell. I'm so lucky I didn't have to go through all of that. But you also, I think when you find out, you don't find out everything in one go. There's this period of uncertainty. So they say there's this thing, so we need to do lots of other tests and check, how far it's got, or whether it's, anywhere else and stuff. So you have this period of time where you don't really want to tell anyone. You can't tell the children yet, because you don't know what the plan is or what the future looks like. And you're just in shock. And so I kind of, we got the diagnosis, went home, and I knew this book needed to be handed in, and I just thought, I need to get this thing off my desk so that I can focus on what I need to do next. Mm-hmm. And so I just carried on editing while waiting for the next appointment. And I just happened to be reading through the chapter on when fear shows up. And I mean, the general concepts were all the same, but it was very gentle. And at that point, I felt like the prey, like the deer or the rabbit, where you're just like, oh, this is happening, and I have no idea which way to turn next or what to focus on. And I thought, I need something much more forthright than this. I need something very concrete and solid that says, focus there, and we're going to do this. And so I pressed delete, and I sort of rewrote that chapter for myself. So there is lots of language around, instead of being the prey, choose to be the predator. What would that feel like if you were to do that instead? So I had this idea of, this thing isn't coming after me. I'm coming after it, and it better watch out. And
yes.
And so what would that look like if I was going to get on the front foot instead of the back foot? And I was going to, there's a quote at the beginning of the book about being active in your own rescue. And it was very much that kind of thing, that you can't change the fact that fear is here, but you can use it to your advantage. So you can use that activation to kind of cultivate the courage to step forward. And it worked, because every time I read that, I did something. So I started, even though I'm usually quite a private person, I actually reached out to a couple of doctors and surgeons that I know and asked for advice, which then led to a recommendation for a surgeon, and I got second opinions, and did my research. I got books recommended, and then I felt like, even though I couldn't change the situation, couldn't make it go away, I took on this really active proactive role in my own rescue, and that felt fundamentally different to this kind of just bracing myself and waiting for things to happen.
Was that your knee-jerk reaction when you heard the news? Was your knee-jerk just like panic? I don't know what to do. I'm frozen.
I think I think in that moment there's lots of stuff sort of rushing through your mind, and it's all to do with the children, right? It's this uncertainty that they need me. So we need to, and I think in the room, I kind of went into this business mode of, probably used a bit of the kind of clinical training there about dealing with high emotion. And I just, there was no emotion in the room. And actually Matt tried to sort of grab my hand and things, and I sort of pushed it away, because I was just like, okay, what do we need to do? When do we need to do it? And I just needed to focus on the doing.
Yeah.
And then we had a bit of time before I was going to go off for these other tests. And that's when we kind of went outside, and then it was like, then allowed the emotion to kind of hit me. And so I don't want to give the impression that I just kind of, dealt with it and there was no emotion, because there were some dark moments in that uncertainty for sure, which there should be, right? The emotion's normal and natural.
Well, you talk in your book about how emotion, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like waves, right? It's like you're in the ocean and you feel these waves coming at you, and you can either, roll with the punches and kind of let them do their thing and know that they're coming and move with the wave, or you can try to like brace yourself against it. And so how do you do that? Roll with the punches, know that the wave is coming, and move with the wave, but then at the same time still be a predator and not prey. Because like in my mind, when I think about being a predator and not prey, I think about like being on the attack and being like firm and strong, but then rolling with the punches and letting a wave hit you is almost like the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. And in some ways they were kind of different moments. So, there were moments where I sort of, went up to my bedroom to have a quiet moment from the children and just take a minute. Or, I know there was another moment where my son was having, we were talking about, those, big emotions that toddlers have. And my son had a moment in a supermarket that normally everyday life I could deal with. But, having to carry him out of the supermarket, screaming was not, I just didn't have the capacity for it at that point. And I remember getting back into the car and just all this emotion coming out. And I think it was because I was carrying so much stress at that point, all the uncertainty and not knowing. And so when those moments happened, I kind of allowed that and, forgave myself for all, my kids were sort of like, oh, we've broken her. But, and it was just, it's just those moments of emotion coming out. And I allowed that to happen. And, my husband was great at, kind of comforting me through that. And I guess, then there are moments when you're able to, because when you're being active and forward, you're still feeling the fear. You're just choosing a different direction. So instead of stepping back, you're stepping forward. And so it's okay to have those moments of pausing and feeling the emotion. And then it's choosing, okay, what am I going to do with this fear now? I'm going to go and make that call. And I'm going to use the fear to propel me forward, as opposed to kind of staying frozen in place.
Did any part of you want to look at your situation and think, why me? Like, why is this happening to me right now? Why can't I be this friend of mine or this person that I saw on social media and everything looks like it's happening, like everything's going right for them, but me right now, I'm just trying to, I don't even know what's going on. I just got diagnosed with cancer. Did you have any sort of bitterness towards your situation?
I think it was really natural, but it surprised me that I had it at both ends of the treatment. So when it initially happens, that natural urge is to think, why me? I've always tried to be healthy, exercise, never smoked or drank or anything like that. Yeah. And so you get all of that kind of natural kind of thought process, which is unhelpful. It doesn't really help in any way.
Did you get some really unhelpful advice from people too? I mean, you don't have to call anybody out, but I mean, like, did anybody say anything you were like, that did not help me out?
I don't know. I think because we were quite quiet because of the children.
Oh, okay.
We didn't want to tell anyone until we told them. And we didn't want to tell them until we knew what the plan was and that I was going to be okay. So I think by the time we told people, we knew what the plan was and we were okay. And maybe it's different for people who are sort of have long-term illnesses and going up and down with it, whereas mine was caught really early, so it was a very much okay, here's the plan, and then I'll be okay. And so I don't think I had much of that, but I did surprise myself with I had the why me at the beginning with the kind of, I'm healthy, that kind of thing, but then I had the why me at the end as well. So when your oncologist says go live your best life, we're done here, you can't help but think of all the people in the waiting room that aren't in that place and don't have such an easy ride of it, and who have to go through potentially months or years of painful or horrible treatments that make them unwell. And on the other side, I think I felt like how did I get away so lightly, and why do I deserve to get through that so easily when other people don't? And so I think you have it at both ends, but it's never very helpful. It's a natural inclination to ask that, but I don't think it helps you really cope with it. So it's good to just leave it behind, I think.
I'm curious how you did decide to approach that conversation with your kids, because I think a lot of people, whether or not it's cancer, have things like come up in life where they're like, how do I talk about this in a way that is not overwhelming to my children, but like it's like digestible, but they also understand like the severity of things?
I think some people were a bit sort of like, don't tell them, but I didn't want to not tell them because I knew they would find out eventually, and I never want them to not trust me. So we always kind of trust them to with the information, but we're there to answer as many questions as we can. So we made sure that we knew what the plan was, and that generally, unless something really wild happened, I was going to be okay. And my son had actually had a big operation on his skull when he was about 2, and that was a big deal, but he's fine now. And so we kind of used that as a comparison. We were actually on holiday, so there was this couple of weeks wait where we were waiting for a referral to go across to the surgeon, and we'd already had a holiday to Florida booked. So the surgeon said, go and do that, rather than sitting at home twiddling your thumbs waiting. Just go and enjoy the distraction, and then we'll do the operation when you get back. And so while we were away, we were actually on our way to a theme park, and we said,
Disney, Universal,
all of that.
Both of them? You did both with the kids?
Yeah. And
it's also cute how you guys say holiday. I love that. I love that. Yesterday we were walking, sorry, I'm just like completely derailing the conversation right now, but we were walking around downtown London, and this girl in the coolest accent, I'm not going to even try to do it because I'm going to just make myself look like an idiot, but she asked Abby where her parents were, like asked about her parents and where they were from, and then she said brilliant, or like I shouldn't.
I told her, she said brilliant, and I was like, I love that.
but you went to Florida on holiday with your kids.
We love Florida, and we've done it a few times, and we were there, and we were on our way to a theme park in the car, and we just said, Mummy's got to have this operation when we get home, but it's not as bad as the operation that Luke had, and so my son, and Luke's fine now, so I'll be fine. And that comparison, that it wasn't going to be as bad as what he had, well, they can see that he's okay, so that seemed to be really reassuring for them to have that comparison. And so they were kind of, oh, okay. And my youngest was like, okay, pass the Lego, let's crack on with our day. And my eldest, she's 12, she later on in a quiet moment asked a couple more questions, and then a few days later she would think of a different question, and we would just ask the questions as they answer the questions as they came up, and tried to be honest, but also kind of secure, like holding their potential fear and uncertainty with it. And but generally they were brilliant. They and pretty unfazed by it.
Thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring this portion of today's episode.
I actually used ZocDoc 2 weeks ago. I use it quite often. Yeah, I realized I was out of my ADHD medicine.
Yes.
And so I set up a doctor's appointment right on the app. I got it same day. It only took an hour to get seen, which was so fast. And then I was able to get my refill.
We love ZocDoc. It is so convenient. We have friends and family that we've also recommended to use it, and they love it too. Basically what it is it's a free app and website where you can search search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment.
We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 100,000 doctors across every specialty, from mental health to dental, primary care to urgent care, and more. You can filter for doctors who take your insurance, who are located nearby, or who are just a good fit based off your medical need. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours. Like I said, I got in same day within about an hour to have my appointment 2 weeks ago. Nice. So it's really convenient, and there's no, waiting at the doctor's office, no driving, spending all that time in the car. It's just really convenient.
It's really, really user-friendly, because I think that can be really confusing to try to find a doctor in the first place, let alone one that also takes your insurance, let alone one that's also highly rated and verified by other patients' use. So we love ZocDoc. We use ZocDoc, and you should too. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/unplanned to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/unplanned. ZocDoc.com/unplanned.
It's so interesting how you used comparison as a good thing in the situation with your kids, comparing your situation to your son's situation. But I feel like online all the time we hear, stop comparing yourself to other people. Comparison is bad. It's not good. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think, saying to people, don't compare yourself, it's like saying don't breathe, right? We are social beings. Yeah. We live in groups. And if you didn't have the ability to compare yourself to other people, you'd be terrible in relationships. You'd be a terrible neighbor, a terrible community member, because, essentially we have the ability to be in a group of people and measure ourselves against, their moral behavior, their choices, what they're doing for each other, how much work they're putting in for each other. All of those things enable us to ensure that we're being a decent human being in that group. So our ability to compare is actually a real strength and really important. But I think what happens is when it goes wrong, we're making the wrong comparisons. We're either comparing ourselves to the wrong people or the wrong thing, or we're doing it intensively. And because never before have we had the ability to see people from across the world that we would never meet and will never meet, but are the absolute best at their thing. So anything you're doing that you feel even vaguely good about, you can go find someone who's doing it 10 times better. Never before have we had that in the history of human beings.
Talk about a confidence killer. When you could just go online at any given moment of any given day and see someone that's way better than you at literally everything that you do.
We used to be able to live in a little town and, you'd be the baker, you'd be the candlestick maker, and, someone else be the, whatever. And there would only be one or two of you in that community that would do that thing, and so you'd be proud of your role. And but now if you're a baker, you can go online and you can see someone who is so good at baking, they started some huge franchise, and and they're selling special sourdough across the world, and you think, oh gosh, well, I'm not doing that. And so those kind of comparisons are terrible. But if let's say you wanted to get better at I don't know, what's your sport? What do you love to play?
Snowboarding.
I like to snowboard.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I like snowboard, but I'm terrible at it. So if you're snowboarding and you want to get better at, I don't know, carving or something, you would, it'd be good to compare yourself to someone who maybe has another year or two's experience, and you could watch them, how they do that particular thing you're trying to improve on. And you can say, what is it they're doing that I'm not? And how can I imitate that? Or how can I be inspired by that to move in that direction and improve based on my goals, based on, something that will improve my life and the things that I'm aiming for. Those kind of comparisons are brilliant, and they help you to learn, right? And improve. But they have to be based on actually something you can use to your advantage and you can benefit from.
Do you ever feel, sorry,
go on.
I was going to say, do you ever feel guilty posting to TikTok as a clinical psychologist?
Feel guilty?
Yeah.
For
because of how damaging social media can be.
Well, I'm not TikTok, so I'm not representative of them. And at the beginning, nobody even really. Well, I was going against the grain professionally because a lot of therapists didn't even use social media at that point. It was all brand new. We had no idea what was going on. And while I can't change the fact that it exists or that everybody's attention is there, I kind of thought, well, I can sit in my therapy room and I can complain about the fact that people are on social media and listening to information that's probably not that helpful to them.
Yeah.
Or I could make one small corner of the internet more positive with better quality information that's evidence-based. So I could slightly increase the chances that anyone who is vulnerable or, you know, looking for answers has a possibility of coming across an answer that's a bit more decent for them or a bit more helpful for them. So, you know, I can't change the tech advances and the, you know, what's happening in the world, but I can just change my little corner of it. So, and I don't think I'm having any particular net positive by just not sharing the information. You know, I could shout about it on the street and 2 people might look around and listen, whereas I can shout about it on, you know, YouTube or TikTok and 2 million people will listen. So
it's funny how the algorithm figures you out. It like knows, at least from my experience, it knows me better than I know myself sometimes, because I'll get in this scrolling mode of why the crap am I even doing this right now?
Yeah.
And then I'll get one of those mental health videos that pop up and it's almost like TikTok saying, hey, we're here for you. We care about your mental health. We're all this. Yeah. And it's like, no, the second that I was thinking about getting off this app, now you're feeding me like actual helpful information, you know? Yeah. It's like TikTok's almost like the source of
what? It has a feature now?
No. It's like a creator's video will pop up. Oh. Like maybe that's why you've blown up so much, is everyone's mental health is so screwed up, and then TikTok's like, oh, let's give them some Dr. Julie Smith videos.
Well, it was a perfect storm in some ways, because as it was the end of 2019 that we started, and then in that kind of December, January, that was when COVID hit and we all went into lockdown and everything. So everybody was at home, everyone was discovering these apps, and, you know, everybody was on them right at that point. They were all just kind of blowing up, and all the short form was really it's going wild. And so, and everyone was interested, you know, everyone's having a hard time and interested in looking after themselves, sometimes for the first time. So yeah, a lot of things kind of came together at the right time, I guess.
A lot of people that listen to our podcast are maybe people interested in starting their family soon, or like new moms. And something we've talked about a lot is like, obviously entering parenthood is like probably one of the bigger shifts you'll ever do in your life. Yeah. And especially for the mom, like mentally, like that mental health shift honestly caught me off guard, even though I was like, felt prepared for it. I was like, I know that we're talking about like how things are going to be different and feel different. Yeah. Experiencing it was a totally a whole new thing. I guess diving into the topic of postpartum, like what is your advice for preparing for that mental adjustment?
Well, do you know what? There's something in my sort of clinical training. We had some lectures around that sort of postnatal period, and I always remember this guy that was lecturing us, and he said a woman's mental health is never more vulnerable than in the first year after she's given birth, through her whole life.
Holy cow.
And I kind of thought, wow. And at the point I thought, why? And I didn't get it, right? And I think it's one of those life experiences that you don't get it until it happens, because it's almost impossible, isn't it, to fully comprehend the changes that a woman goes through. You know, when you're pregnant, I remember my doctor saying every cell in your body is pregnant when you're pregnant. It changes everything, and not the same as the next pregnant woman either. It's always different. Everyone's different, and I think the same is true in that year after giving birth, isn't it? And with, you know, feeding and the temperament of your baby and what's going on with them and your family situation and your work situation, and I mean, you guys, like in America, there's not much in the way of leave, is there, for mothers and stuff? There's lots of pressure to go back to work very quickly and stuff, and that's just, you know, all of those things take such a toll, and I think modern, like we were talking about, lack of community, right? That if you take anyone, you know, take all the babies out of it, you take any human being, and you want to kind of break them down, you would you would mess about with their routine. You would take sleep out of the equation. You would isolate them from other people. And you'd kind of mess around with their diet and things like that. And after a woman's had a baby, all of those things, which are weapons of war, by the way, right? They're used to break people down because it works. But after a woman's had a baby, all of those things are affected monumentally. And then we kind of question why women are struggling after giving birth and or kind of, I guess dulling things down, or the baby blues and things like that. And but it's really quite serious, and I think to our detriment we talk about hormones and things like that as if they are the culprit, as if it's a fault in a woman's system. But it's not. A woman is built to have children and to function and do all of those things, but modern society is set up ignoring all of those needs and how important that job is and how important it is to do it well for our future generations as well. So I think I'm getting on my sandwich board now, kind of, is
that another sandwich board?
That's sort of, preaching about, what we should be doing for women and things like that. But, I think I guess we can't change things that everybody else is doing or everybody else's opinion or of that period of time. But the more women we can tell about, all of those needs and that they're normal and natural and that, modern life isn't set up to accommodate that. And so we have to do what we can to acknowledge our own needs and put them first and hold healthy boundaries and to recognize our need for, social interaction and sleep occasionally and all of these and decent meals and those kind of things, then that can only be a sort of move in the right direction, I guess.
I feel like every new mom or anyone that has ever gone through this stage of life is just clapping in their car right now or wherever they're listening to this, because the way you phrase that just so perfectly put into words something that I felt but never even could acknowledge. Yeah. And so I just think even just sharing that is just helping so many women. I want to talk a little bit more about hormones, because I thought it was really interesting how you said hormones are the culprit. How do you recommend balancing okay, this is a hormone thing and hormones and emotions, how do we navigate the two of those things? Because sometimes I'm I can't trust my emotions because of my hormones, and I feel like there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, I think it's always a judgment call, right? Because hormones make up who we are also, but they're influenced by everything that we do, right? What we're eating, how much we're sleeping, how much stress we're under, whether we've just had a baby, all of those things, or where we are on our cycle, all of those things. And so if we're feeling an intense emotion, it can be to do with hormones, but it can also be to do with needs that aren't being met, right? So I think something that happens in therapy is people will have an emotion and then judge themselves for it. And when they judge themselves for it, they then feel the need to numb it or make it go away because they're not supposed to have it. Or, maybe it's just hormones, or maybe it's just... And that causes all sorts of kind of behaviors or coping strategies that are generally unhelpful, right? The stuff that makes it, numbs it now doesn't help in the long run. They're the addictive things, right? But if we sort of turn from the judgment to the curiosity. So if someone's in therapy and they feel something and then they judge themselves for it, I would just kind of, okay, well, let's notice that judgment or how you've just criticized yourself. And let's just turn towards curiosity. How interesting that you feel that way. What came before it? What came 2 days, 3 days before it? And when you start, all these things seem kind of out of character or, a bit bizarre until you hear someone's full story. And when you piece the puzzle together, you always go, of course I feel that way. Why wouldn't I feel that way? Why wouldn't I, I don't know, jump down my partner's throat when he was late for dinner? I had 2 hours sleep last night. I'm at capacity for stress. And then you start to kind of understand that emotion is information. But your brain only has so many, your brain is always trying to make sense of everything that's going on around you and in your body. So it takes information from in your body, like, your breathing, your heart rate, your blood pressure, that kind of thing. And it also takes information from all of your senses to your outside world. But it doesn't have all the information, it just has those clues to go on. And so your emotional state is your brain's sort of communication to you about the meaning to make of this situation. So sometimes that's pretty accurate to reality, and other times it's not accurate to reality. And so our job then is to notice an emotion, and this is a lot of the work that we do in therapy, is we'll kind of notice an emotional state, but we'll try and get a little bit of distance from it. So sometimes you can do that with just language. So I notice I'm feeling anxious, or I notice I'm having lots of feelings of sadness every now and then, and just by starting the sentence with that, I notice feelings of, rather than I am anxious, or I am low, or I am depressed. It's not who you are, it's an experience you're having. And when you kind of notice that, then you're looking at it with a bit of curiosity. Oh, what's that about? Because you might be anxious because you had 3 coffees this morning, or you might be anxious because you're waiting for some test results, or you might be anxious because your baby's been keeping you up at night, and actually that's making your stress threshold a little wobbly. And so I think it's important to kind of, for us to move away from that idea of, if a woman feels something, it's just hormones and she should be dismissed, to, let's look at it with curiosity. Is there anything we can do to, if you are having peaks and troughs of intense emotion, highs and lows, what things can you do to look after yourself to help prevent those peaks being so high and so intense? Because there are things you can do to kind of, prevent those from happening so intensely.
What is it your husband says to you that makes you think that everything's going to be okay?
Matt's like, I'm curious.
I don't know. So I guess it depends on the situation. He's quite a positive, he's an optimist for sure. He's quite a sort of positive person and a problem solver. And in that sense, he quite struggled with that period of uncertainty when I was unwell, because he's a fixer, right? And it's the kind of situation you can't fix. And we've got these bushes at our house. They're like box hedging, right? And it's a certain type of hedging, and there's this moth that has come over from somewhere else in the world and has no predators here, and it's killing this particular type of hedge.
No. So
these beautiful hedges we've got, he's got all these things, and he's trying to save the hedge, and he's spraying it with this chemical to kill this moth, and he was doing that at the time, and I could see him really going for it, and he's trying really hard to kind of save these bushes, and I could see that he was trying to fix something at the time, because we couldn't fix the thing, and I could see him getting more and more kind of emotional about it. And so I think in those situations where something's not fixable, it's probably harder for him, because he's so proactive and so optimistic that with most things he can find a way through, because he'll look for the opportunities rather than the hurdles, right? And he'll always assume that we can get over the hurdles. And
is he good at being empathetic or observant of you? I noticed you said, rather than saying I am anxious, say the word feeling anxious. Does he ever put words to your feelings and helps you understand that he is seeing you as you are, and he is trying to
no,
empathize
I don't think so. I mean, he's not from a psychology background at all, so he's in some ways I've kind of probably increased his vocab on that kind of thing. So not really. He's not kind of an emotional person, or But sometimes that's a good balance, right? Imagine if we were both like therapy types; it would just be awful, wouldn't it? We'd be talking about how we feel all the time. It's a really nice balance, I think, to have someone who's very action focused and proactive, and someone who's much more verbal and kind of insightful. I think we balance each other out a lot. Yeah.
I want to zoom in on that distinction that you picked up on, because that stood out to me as well. That distinction between I am anxious and what did you say? And like
or I notice feelings, I'm noticing feeling. Yeah.
Because I think you kind of were making the point that separation allows for curiosity.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what? Did it feel like that door?
That was somebody else's. That wasn't into that was somebody else.
I've been really edgy recently because I read a scary book on the plane. And so I was like, Matt, are you feeling scared in this space? And he's like, no, I think we were having turbulence,
and Abby was like gripping my arm, like
Wait, I actually want to talk about that because this is kind of relevant to the postpartum conversation.
Yes.
I was never, ever afraid of turbulence. In fact, I kind of thought it was fun, especially as a kid. Like, I was like, oh, it's like kind of shaky, like a ride.
Yeah.
Ever since I got pregnant, it wasn't even before I had the baby. Pregnancy onward. Turbulence literally makes my hands sweat, like I feel myself, I can't sleep, like I'm so on edge.
Yeah.
And I think that just speaks to how like you are literally, everything about you has changed once you become a mom. And I feel like that was like the time I was like, now I'm afraid of turbulence.
When you think about it, it makes so much sense for a woman's sensitivity to threat to be heightened when she's had a child, right? Because you're responsible for keeping this little human safe. And so, you know, I see that in that kind of difference between mums and dads sometimes, certainly between Matt and I will see some danger long before everyone else has seen it, and I'm on high alert, you know, there's something around the corner, and you feel like you're overreacting, but it's also, you know, I will hear the babies cry at night first, and you know, it's like that part of my brain that's always awake, and
that happens.
But it's how incredible, like how, you know, it's a strength. But it does mean that in modern life, like when we all go on the airplane and things like that, I used to love flying, but now it's more of a thing I have to tolerate because we're all on this flight together, and yeah, that feels.
And you even said when you got your cancer diagnosis, I found it so cool that, I'm just curious about how you're like, I can't have cancer, I have kids. Like that's the first thing you think about. You're like, no, you're not thinking about like, what is this treatment going to be like for me? Like, what is this going to look like? You're like, there's people that need me.
Yeah.
And
it makes you braver, I think, being a parent, doesn't it?
Totally.
Yeah, because you're less, you're more selfless. So you're kind of focused on their experience and their well-being, and then you know that you can cope with it. And you know, when my son was having an operation, and I just wished that I could do it for him, and I wouldn't have, you know, I would have done that in the blink of an eye, gone through that for him. And so I think that's some of the strengths of parents, is you would go through anything for them, and you just,
I love that,
and you would feel much braver in facing it than before you were a parent.
I love that. Parenthood makes you braver.
Yeah.
But
it makes you more scared at the same time.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I feel like everything about being a parent is like so
terrifying.
What is that? Paradoxical?
Yeah.
Where it's like, you're just like, it's both extremes at the same time.
You have more fear and more threat, but you have more courage to see you through it. And actually, when we're talking about this sort of what we call diffusion, you know, kind of separating yourself from the feeling, you do that a lot with thoughts as well. So you can kind of say, you know, if as a parent you have all these kind of catastrophizing thoughts, don't you? All the worst case scenarios go through your mind. The horror stories are always there, ready to tell you, keep this child safe. But we do kind of thought diffusion in therapy, where you go, okay, I notice I'm having thoughts that you know, he's going to die, or he's going to fall ill, or he's going to, you know, so you precede that thought, that horror story thought, with, I notice I'm having thoughts that. And what you're doing there is you're taking that thought from here, where you can't see anything else, to here, arm's length, where you're going, there's a thought. So you can see it for what it is, which is one possible perspective. And then you've got this kind of space to consider other perspectives. You know, okay, there's the worst case scenario. What's the best case scenario? And what are all those kind of 50 shades in between of the different things that could happen? And so it just takes the power up, because the power of any thought is in how much you buy into it and how much you believe it's factual or a true predictor of the future. And actually, thoughts can't be factual because they are influenced by so many different factors. So, you know, you are more likely to have catastrophizing thoughts when you're tired, or when you're hungry, or when you're stressed. You know, all of these different things impact on our thought process. So people talk a lot about, you know, what you think impacts how you feel, but how you feel impacts what you think as well. So if you're stressed and anxious about something at work, you're more likely then to, in your home life, for example, skip to a worst case scenario just because of where you're at with your stress levels. So it makes sense then to kind of get that separation from a thought and just see it for what it is, which is a bias. So if you're stressed, you're going to be biased towards worst case scenarios because your body is essentially in threat mode and looking for threats. And then you can kind of see it for what it is, which takes some of the power out of it.
I think it's really interesting, like you're a mental health specialist, and so I feel like mental health I always associate with like thinking about yourself, like how you're doing, but you made the point that like being a parent gives you like that outward focus, which makes you braver and makes you catastrophize sometimes as well. And I think I also heard you make that comparison in talking about social situations, like that outward focus. And I think that was a really interesting point that you made. So can you talk about how like an outward focus in social settings can be beneficial?
So something that came up in the research for people with social anxiety is they tend to have an inward focus. So if you're socially anxious or you're feeling socially awkward, you'll be focused on how am I coming across, how am I sitting, how am I speaking, what are other people thinking of me, So it's all about that kind of self-doubt and that kind of what am I doing wrong? Whereas someone who's feeling confident socially will not be focused on all those things. They'll be focused outward on the people they're interacting with and wanting to get to know them or wanting to find out about something or you know, those kind of things, wanting to know how they're feeling and making them feel welcome and calm and comfortable. And so sometimes when you're dealing with people who are socially anxious, it can be a job of kind of just shifting the focus of the attention. So you can focus on all the things you may or may not be doing right or doing well, but you could also focus on what's going on outside of yourself. And I remember doing that with someone when I was dealing with someone who had lots of social anxiety and paranoia, and we had to have a kind of, we call them an MDT, so like a multidisciplinary meeting with all these different professionals that are involved. And they were so frightened about it. And so all we did was we said, okay, here's pen and paper. Every time someone says something that could be part of the plan moving forward, write it down. So then that person was, instead of focusing on what are they thinking of me, what are their judgments about me, what am I doing, how am I sitting, they were focused on looking out for the plan and then writing it down. So they had a different focus, that was all. And it changed how they coped with the situation, and it changed how anxious, you know, they still felt anxious, but it just shifts it down a notch so it's more manageable and you've got something to do with it.
Would you say like curiosity is one of the best weapons against fear, anxiety, depression?
Yeah.
It seems like it's all coming back to curiosity in a way.
Do you know what? That's so much of what happens in a therapeutic environment is shifting from judgment to curiosity. And whether it's with yourself, you know, if you're judging yourself, you're going to make yourself miserable. But also if you're constantly judging outside of yourself, you know, other people or their interactions, then that's going to make both of you miserable because your relationship will be hell as well. So a lot of it is shifting from, you know, acknowledging that judgments arrive because that's what your brain is set up to do, to make suggestions and find meaning in things, but to kind of park that and shift back to that kind of question mark of how interesting. So, you know, that will happen a lot in therapy where someone feels something or does something and then all of that kind of self-loathing comes forth. And we go, okay, well, let's notice that. Notice how that self-criticism really started to rise up. Let's just shift a minute to, isn't that interesting that happened? What was going on there? Let's ask questions around it and let's understand it more. And when you understand something, the judgment feels less relevant anyway, because the judgment is a shortcut, isn't it, to understanding something. It's a quick understanding that doesn't acknowledge a lot of the things that should be acknowledged.
That's a really interesting point.
Judgment is almost like something that we all need to be able to do and do often in our day-to-day life just to survive. It almost feels like something humans have used for thousands of years to live, because we can't sit here and mull over the details of everything. That's overthinking. That's not helpful. So judgment is very useful, but then at the same time, it's like it can be very damaging too, right? It's like maybe even with people close to us in our life. I'm thinking about, you know, maybe marital conflict, like where people get into fights. It's like, I think oftentimes one person is judging the other person, and if they would have just thought through, oh, they're feeling this way because if we go back on the timeline, this happened and then this happened, and oh, that totally makes sense why they're feeling that way. And if we would have just gone back and looked at all the sequence of events that happened, we can maybe empathize with them.
For sure. And it's important for it not to become a kind of source of self-criticism in itself, right? That I judge someone, oh, I'm such a bad person. Because like you say, it's part of being human. It's that shortcut that your brain makes for you. It's doing that for you. And there are times when you have to really trust your judgment and use it. And it's really great for that. You know, you don't want to lose trust in your own ability to judge a situation, because then you become really vulnerable to being exploited by other people. You know, you then start to trust other people and their judgments more than your own. It's about kind of being able to trust it, but also not let it dictate with impulsively. So you can acknowledge that judgment and then make your own decision. So it's that metacognition. So cognition being a kind of fancy word for thoughts. We all have the ability to think, but then as humans, we have this incredible ability to think about the thoughts that we're having. And that's really the function of therapy, is to go, oh, you were thinking that. Well, you know, let's talk about that. And so you're looking down on that thought process with a bird's eye view, so that you can kind of see what's going on in your mind.
Well, I don't want you to speak about specific story. You're obviously not going to do this because you're very professional. You would never share, like, you know, personal details about a patient's life. But I'm sure you've probably had people come to you who were not only someone that's been through something traumatic, but maybe you've had someone that's a caretaker of someone that had cancer, or a caretaker of someone that went through some hard thing. And, you know, I wonder what it looks like from a therapy standpoint of talking to someone that's been a caretaker and helping them figure out how to take care of themselves too when they're so focused on somebody else.
Yeah, do you know, it's a big thing that I often get asked about it in kind of work environments as well, in sort of corporate settings where people are trying to take care of a colleague even. And what happens is people kind of set themselves up on this pedestal of, you know, I need to somehow be a qualified psychologist and say all the right things and get this right. Otherwise, you know, and so we see ourselves as fully responsible for that other person, which is a really difficult place to be, isn't it? And so then what happens is, because we feel we can't do it perfectly, a lot of people pull back and they don't say anything at all. And that's when, you know, we avoid people or something like that. And when we talk about kind of supporting people, I always say, you don't have to be the therapist. You don't have to be anything other than yourself, because support in the form of, you know, love, kindness, compassion, just showing someone that you care can be so pivotal for someone. And you don't even have to be good at talking or, you know, because some people are afraid, gosh, if I ask about this and they tell me, I'm not going to know how to respond. And that's okay if you're not the talker, you know. You might be, I mean, I remember working with people who were experiencing grief, and how a few of them would say how much they valued those friends that didn't necessarily talk about it, but offered a distraction. You know, the friend that says, let's go for a dog walk twice a week. And then they save up like, you know, funny videos they found online to share, or they talk about a book they've been reading, or, you know, the local gossip, whatever it is, that counts as support. If you're showing up and you're, you know, being a friend, it doesn't really matter how you do that, as long as it's helping that person in some way. And I think if you don't know how to help someone, it's okay to ask. It's okay to say, actually, it's fantastic to say, do you know what, if you're not okay, that really matters to me because I care a lot about you.
Yeah.
And I want to support you, but I have no idea how to in this situation. What do you think? What could I do that would be helpful to you at this point? Because it might be, could you look after the kids when I go to my doctor's appointment or my therapy appointment? Mm-hmm. Or it might be, come round once a week, let's watch a movie. And that's okay. Lots of people will have an idea about how they can be supported, and it doesn't involve solving their problems. It involves just being with them through it and showing that you care.
I'm thinking there's a parent listening to this right now that wants to know what the first step is for them to take to get their mental health back on track. What would you say to that person?
I guess it depends in what way it's come off track, if you know what I mean.
Let's say they're a new mom. Let's say it's someone that's in that first year after having a baby, and they just maybe don't feel like themselves. They're having trouble getting out.
Yeah.
Their routine's messed up. They're not even brushing their teeth some days.
Yeah.
And their house is a mess, and they feel like a failure, and they're stuck in this negative thought cycle that they just can't get out of. What's step one?
We always go back to the basics. So we were saying about the weapons of war and the things that if you take them away from people, then they become vulnerable to becoming unwell.
Yeah.
An old supervisor of mine used to call it the solid back four, because he was really into football or soccer. So you guys
nice.
About how you have 4 defense players, and if you don't want to lose a game, then you need to get your defenses sorted, and that there's these kind of core defenses in mental health. And since then I've kind of added on, doesn't really fit to have a number 5 for the soccer metaphor, but we'll go with 5.
Pretend.
So there's good nutrition, what you're eating, routine and daylight at the right times, movement and exercise, what have we got? Sleep and social connection. So I always go back to those first. You can do all these kind of fancy therapeutic stuff or talk for hours about something, but none of that's going to be helpful or as helpful as it could be unless you get the basics and the foundations, those core defenses first. And it really is a foundation that enables you to be resilient to the fact that, when you've got a young baby or something, you're not going to sleep and stuff like that.
So what do they do? Because I'm sure someone's saying, okay, great. Yeah, I'm not sleeping at all at night.
Yeah.
What do they do then?
So what you do is, if you know that one of those defenses is being pulled down at a certain period of time, then you have to kind of prop up with some of the other ones. So, if you're not sleeping well, then it's really, really important that you eat something decent during the day, or that you stay hydrated, or that you move your body and get some daylight during the day, so that your sleep, your circadian rhythm is staying kind of matched to day and night, and that you see other human beings and other adults. And I was terrible at that. I mean, I'm such an introvert. I'm a really kind of shy, quiet person. And I remember when I had my daughter, it was in the autumn time, and I went through the winter, and I just didn't really, I didn't join groups, or I didn't none of my friends had babies at that point. And I realized now that was just the wrong move, and sometimes it feels uncomfortable, or you feel like you haven't got it together, or, you haven't got 2 hours to get ready or whatever. But if you can sort of overcome some of those thoughts and fears and make it happen, knowing that it is fundamental to your health, it can be quite transforming. Just going out for a coffee with someone, if you haven't seen anyone for like 3 weeks because you've got a new baby, that's a big thing to do, and makes quite a fundamental shift to how you feel. So I think it's acknowledging that those 5 things are fundamental sort of core defenses. So if you know one of them is down because your baby's not sleeping, you've got to pick it up elsewhere. But those things will help to kind of cradle you almost as you're going through this sort of period of time, which is temporary and will change and shift. But you've got to support yourself through with those core human needs.
That was
the social life one, I think, is really hard, especially for new parents.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes your friends want to hang out at times that aren't good for kids to be there. Maybe it's late at night, and then your kids wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, so you're not going to stay out till 1 a.m. with your friends. Plus, then you need a sitter to be at home with your... So there's so many things that go on, but something that I've found that's been helpful for me is Abby, when she makes dinner, I'll take the boys to the park, and they'll just run around and have a great time, and I just sit and chat with like other parents, and it's crazy how talking to other people going through the same thing that you're going through, which like our life is, we're good. Like I don't have anything to complain about, but it's just funny, like any sort of like negative thing I could think of in my life, you talk to another parent and they're like, oh yeah, I have that same crap happen to me like every day. And you're like, oh, let's go. And it's almost like having that like commonality it's so So good.
You feel less alone with it and less judgmental about yourself for experiencing it. And I think there is a degree of that where you have to be willing to kind of make new friends who are living the same life as you to a degree, you know, who are in that chapter. And it doesn't mean you have to leave other friends behind. But like you say, if you need social interaction during the day, but actually all of your friends still work full time because they haven't had children yet, then it really helps to meet other people who are in the same shoes as you and going through the same thing.
And someone that can't afford therapy, there's, you know, therapy can be expensive.
Yeah.
We've actually, in the past, we had some therapists that actually were not very good. And luckily now we found a very good therapist, and we realized, wow, the first couple that we had were, I don't know how they got licensed. I don't know what happened, but you're clearly someone that's very good at what you do. So what do you recommend to someone who doesn't have the budget to spend, you know, $300, $400, $500 an hour on a really good therapist?
Really good friends are good. You know, a lot of therapy is shifting attention, shifting perspective, and who's better to give you a fresh perspective than a really good friend that you trust and whose opinion you value but doesn't necessarily always match your own. And again, it's the community thing, right? You know, all of these psychologists and therapists are kind of replacing what used to be community. And there's still a place for that because there's still certain private things that you want to go to and talk to someone privately. But, you know, you can't underestimate the value of really good friends or neighbors or, you know, people that you look after and they look after you. And and also, I think if you're going through something specific, you can educate yourself these days, and that's the beauty of modern life, is that information's become really, you know, we're all on YouTube. There's almost nothing you can't learn on YouTube, a little bit about it. And if you take everything you receive with a degree of kind of critical thinking and try to get different opinions and stuff like that, then you can really kind of develop some kind of new concepts or ideas that could help you. And so, yeah, there's lots of things at our disposal now, I think.
I want to do a rapid fire questionnaire with you, but before we do that, I want to tell everyone, go buy Open When, Dr. Julie Smith's new book. It's very, very good. New York Times best-selling author. Just, it's so good. If you haven't read her first book, definitely check that one out as well. But where can people connect with you online? What's the best way?
Either YouTube or Instagram. I'm on there. So yeah, all the videos are on there. But yeah, the book is Open When.
I have yet to pick up a copy, but I'm going to do that. Is the format like Open When? Like you talked about the chapter about fear. So is it broken up into like? Yeah. You've talked a lot about bite size.
It came from a follower actually who sent me a lovely gift, and I didn't know this was a thing people did for each other, but it was loads of tiny little envelopes, and it said, you know, open when you're having a bad day, open when you're stressed, and you open them up, and they all had little quotes inside, and they were supposed to just kind of give you a little boost and on the days when you need it. And I thought that was such a cool idea, and then, you know, at the time, I realized people were using my first book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? They were kind of taking it with them to places in case they had a sort of crisis or a moment where they really needed it. And I thought, oh, I wasn't really written for that. You know, it's more kind of skills and concepts that you learn and practice to improve over time. But it wasn't the words you need to hear when you're in the eye of the storm, you know, when you're in the moment and you just need a good talking to. So, you know, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before is more the sort of work on this and build it over time, whereas Open When is when you're in the thick of it and you don't know which way is up, is a little pep talk and a few skills that get you through the moment.
I love that. And I like that, especially in the form of a book, because sometimes like committing to a book can feel overwhelming for people, especially on something as serious and big as mental health. Yeah. And this feels like, especially I'm thinking about a mom too. You're like, I can't sit down and read a book cover to cover.
Oh my God. Who reads a book cover to cover after they've had children?
I actually did read a lot because I was nursing all the time. But now that I have toddlers, I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to read.
Yeah, that's
but,
it.
I like that that's like organized in that way. So then you can just get
so each chapter is a different scenario that we all face at some point. But the idea is that you can pick it up, dip in where it's relevant to you, and then get back out again. It's the way I like to read.
Yeah, I'm excited to pick it up.
Okay, finish this sentence. Okay, this is our rapid fire questionnaire.
Where did you come up with this?
Okay. I actually had AI come up with these.
No.
Here's some quick questions. Okay, so finish the sentence. The most toxic relationship advice I see online is...
that if someone isn't meeting your expectations, just ditch them. You know, that kind of, if your friend doesn't support you in what you're doing, get rid of them, as if they're, as if friendship is something to be kind of disregarded so easily, or relationships, and that focus on, everyone needs to be good enough for me and what I'm doing. Otherwise, they're not going to be in my life, rather than looking at what are you bringing to that friendship, and are you also being a good friend in return? Or sometimes someone is saying something you don't want to hear, but it might be what you need to hear. Or, so probably that kind of stuff. I think the kind of disregarding relationships too quickly and too easily.
That kind of seems like an ego thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're not meeting my needs, but boo on them. It's like,
true or false, you can't be a good partner if you're not working on yourself?
I would say false, because, there's this, again, it's online, isn't it? This idea that you must be healed in order to, be a good partner and be in a relationship, heal yourself before you look for a relationship. And it's like, I think if everybody followed that rule, if you had to be fully healed and they had to be fully healed, and you would never meet anyone. You would definitely not meet anyone in time to have children.
That is true.
So, and I think, and it disregards the fact that in a good relationship, you live together and you learn together and you get better at me and my husband are so much better at being in a relationship than we were when we first got together, because we're always working on it and we're always being honest with each other and trying harder and making changes. And so I feel like our relationship's better than ever, but I don't feel like we were two perfect human beings when we got together.
When we got together, like, I didn't know who the frick I was. We were literally children. That's really good advice, because I heard that too, and I was like, did we mess it up? I wasn't perfect before I married Abby.
I wasn't healed.
Do I need to work? I need to work on myself.
Just creates that expectation, doesn't it? That's like perfectionism.
And it doesn't allow for, like, that mindset almost makes you feel like you have to have arrived when you enter a relationship, when like relationship isn't something that's like solid like that. Like, there's life causes things to move and shift around.
This idea that if it's messy, it's not good enough. Or, if there are messy moments that can't be worked through, that you have to ditch it and find the perfect relationship.
I like that. That's really good.
Another one. What do you think about the trend where parents never tell their kids no? They're just refusing to say no to their kids.
I just don't know how that's possible. All of the requests that my kids make. My life would be wild if I never said no. Oh, gosh. Again, when we were talking about boundaries before, boundaries help children to feel safe. And in school, for example, right? My kids know that there are certain things you can't do in school, and they're okay with that. The kind of, I don't know, you don't skip the line at lunchtime, or you don't hit that other child. And then once they know those boundaries, they kind of feel good that they know them, and they feel safe that, and I guess same for us. Like, if we're living in a community, I mean, England's not that really different from America in terms of, sort of culture and stuff. But like, if there was big differences about how we lived here or what we expected from each other, you would want to know that when you got here, and so that you could adjust and feel safe that you were kind of living in line with it. And that involves yeses and nos, doesn't it? And saying no to yourself. And so, I'm probably going to get lots of abuse online for, I don't know, not following that trend.
This is probably,
I didn't even know that was a trend, but that's kind of scary.
This is probably the most controversial question we're going to ask on this whole podcast.
What?
Coffee or tea?
Oh, well, I'm an English girl. More since having kids, coffee. Because
no way.
Tea gives you this like long-lasting kind of energy through the day, right?
Yeah.
But if you've been up in the night with a couple of kids, you need a bit of coffee in the morning to get you going, don't you? So,
I drank caffeinated tea right before bed last night. That's why I was like, Matt, I don't know why I'm like kind of jazzed right now. I chugged it.
Yeah,
because I was like, we're here in the UK.
Yeah, keep you awake.
What's the funniest thing that we do, or the most interesting thing? I know I was teasing you a bit about the rabbit and the headlights. What's something that you've noticed about me?
I will say, as an American in the UK, I feel so tacky. Like, I just feel like people here are much classier. Like, I just feel like, I'm like, oh man, that I'm just gonna be too casual or too like,
I think that happens more and more as you go into Europe as well. As we were talking about Italy and things like that, and France, and they're just lovely and kind of sophisticated.
Well, look at what you're wearing. You look very sophisticated.
I wish I was more sophisticated.
But we love you guys when we come over to America. Like, we love when we recently went to kind of New York and Boston and everywhere. We just love all the kind of, we've been teaching the kids the American history and stuff because we went to see Hamilton in New York. And I just think there's this mutual fascination between our two countries. It's lovely.
I know.
Also, the other thing I've noticed, we've talked about this, the cups. Like,
they were really small.
Portions in general are so much smaller here.
Yeah.
Which I honestly think that America should probably take a note of.
You go to a gas station in America,
I want a little bit more
it's like
water.
A cup. It's like this big. Like, the cups are huge. You get
a
soda.
A water cup at the restaurant yesterday, this big. I'm like, I could use a little bit more water than that. Like, look, have you seen our water bottles? This is my small one.
Yeah, well, sometimes when we go to America,
this is my travel size.
We'll order a meal just to see how big it is. Like, we'll order a sandwich because you're known for having huge sandwiches. And
are you shocked when you get it?
Yeah, all the time. Because you can never finish it, right? You can never finish a meal.
That is, we should learn from that.
Can mom guilt be a good thing?
It can if you're doing something wrong, I think.
Again,
it's like all emotions are information, right? But sometimes they get it wrong. So sometimes guilt is something you want to listen to because, maybe you feel guilty after really losing it with your child and doing something that is not within your kind of parenting values at all. Then that guilt is something to listen to because it will enable you to think about, okay, what am I going to do differently when that comes up again? How am I going to do it better? Because if you kind of numbed that guilt and didn't think about it, then you probably just go around the cycle again. But sometimes guilt is sort of like, I feel guilty that I'm going out and exercising because I'm going to have an hour away from my baby. And that's guilt to kind of go, I'm not going to numb it. I'm going to take it with me, knowing that I'm still doing something that's good for us as a family.
And is it selfish to prioritize your marriage over your kids?
Oh, do you know what? My husband, Matt, heard something. I don't know. I can't remember where he heard it from. There was probably online, something that said, if you have, an extra hour in the week to spend with your children or spend with your partner, spend it with your partner and work on your marriage. Because one of the best things you can do for your children is have a good marriage and stay together for them and, be a solid team, which I kind of think, that makes sense, right?
It's good.
I mean, I can't take credit for that. It wasn't my advice. But, those little things that make you think, well, if there's something that reinforces your marriage and holds you together and makes you work together as a team, as parents, that's got to be time well spent, hasn't it?
Well, I feel like there were so many things about this conversation that surprised me, but were so practical that I can take and so useful, because I think sometimes in the mental health space, especially when we've been taken back to those basic needs as parents or new parents, can feel so okay, that's ideal, but really, how am I going to practice that? I feel like you do such a good job of, like you said, I like how taking your own words, making it bite-sized, but it was still so surprising, so many things but very refreshing. So I appreciate your messages and the way that you make them so consumable for the people that follow you and the people that read your work. And
you guys are so good at this. You make it so easy to just sit and look at us just chatting.
Oh, you're so kind.
We've known each other for years.
Well, we've had a really fun time chatting with you. I love hearing your takes and hearing how you say rabbit and headlights. It's so fun. Thank you, Dr. Julie. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is awesome.